The sky over Khyber Pakhtunkhwa turned dark and heavy, as if an invisible hand had pulled a curtain of black clouds across the mountains. Villagers looked up and sensed that something unusual was about to happen, but no one could imagine the scale of what was coming. Then, suddenly, the heavens cracked open. Rain did not fall. It attacked, pouring down in furious sheets, striking the earth with a violence that shook the valleys. Within minutes, streams turned into rivers, and rivers became oceans of destruction. Gentle mountain brooks that children once played beside were no longer recognizable. They were transformed into raging monsters, tearing to the land with unstoppable force. As the storm continued, thunder roared like the sound of cannons, and lightning split the sky into pieces. The mountains themselves seemed alive, trembling under the endless pressure of the rain. Rocks the size of houses broke free and crashed down into the valleys. Whole slopes gave way, turning into deadly landslides that buried everything beneath them. Villages that had existed for centuries, standing proudly along the foothills, were wiped away in moments. Houses built by generations of hard work dissolved in the current, as if they had never been there at all. Families clung to whatever they could, rooftops, tree trunks, even floating debris, watching in horror as the floodwaters consumed their homes, their fields, their memories. The real terror came from the sudden flash floods. Small streams and seasonal nullahs that normally trickled peacefully became walls of water. They burst out with a roar so loud it drowned every other sound. In seconds, roads were swallowed, cars were overturned, and bridges snapped like toys. The flood did not spare anything. It carried away cattle, crops, and in some cases entire neighborhoods. Survivors said it felt like the mountains themselves were collapsing, like nature had turned against its own creation. Across the province, the destruction was unimaginable. Hundreds of bridges collapsed, cutting off villages from the outside world. Highways vanished under layers of mud and broken rock. Power lines fell, plunging entire districts into darkness just as the people needed light the most. Farmers watched helplessly as their fields, their lifeline, were drowned under thick, muddy water. Crops worth billions were destroyed in hours, leaving thousands with nothing but despair. In many areas, entire communities were stranded, waiting desperately for helicopters and rescue boats to reach them. Meteorologists later explained that this was not an ordinary disaster. It was a deadly meeting of three powerful forces: sudden cloudbursts, record-breaking monsoon rains, and the rapid melting of glaciers from the northern mountains. Together, they created a monster of water and destruction that struck harder than anyone had ever imagined. Experts called it a once-in-a-century flood, a disaster that shattered records and tested the resilience of both land and people. But behind the statistics and scientific explanations were human stories. Families torn apart, children searching for their parents, villages where every house was reduced to rubble. People described hearing the flood before they saw it, a roar like thousands of lions charging at once. And when it arrived, it swallowed everything in its path. Helicopters hovered above, pulling people from rooftops, while soldiers and volunteers waded waist-deep through the freezing waters to save whoever they could. Yet despite all efforts, countless lives were lost, entire families vanished, and thousands were left homeless. When the skies finally cleared, what remained was a landscape scarred forever. Where once there were fields and homes, now there was only mud, stone, and silence. The people of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa stood shattered, yet unbroken. They buried their dead with trembling hands. They mourned their losses, and then, with the same resilience that has always defined them, they began the slow task of rebuilding. The mountains still stood tall, the rivers still flowed, but the memory of that flood, the memory of the day the heavens fell upon the earth, would never be forgotten. This was not just rain. This was not just a storm. This was nature at its most furious, a reminder of its unstoppable power. It was a flood that shook mountains, erased villages, and turned rivers into monsters. It was a fury of the sky unleashed upon the land. This was a flood that changed Khyber Pakhtunkhwa forever.